All right, good evening and welcome to the Danvers Planning Board meeting of November 28th, 2023. Let's see here. First item on the agenda is the public hearing zoning bylaw amendments, an overview from staff of the proposed zoning bylaw amendments for special town meeting February 5th, 2024. Public hearing is regarding a number of updates to the following sections of the Danvers zoning bylaw for purposes of clarity, consistency, and reflection of current Massachusetts case law. Section 1, purpose and application. Section 2, administration. Section 3, general provisions. Section 4, site plan review. Section 6, use regulations. Section 7, dimensional requirements. Section 9, accessory uses. Section 10, R-Street parking standards. Section 15, healthcare district. Section 16, waterfront village district. Section 18, character-based zoning districts. Section 19, Danvers Town Center Core District. Section 20, Danvers Town Center Live Work District. Section 21, High Street Mixed Use Corridor District. Section 22, Maple Street Traditional Neighborhood Development Smart Growth Overlay District. Section 27, Groundwater Protection District Bylaw. Section 29, Affordable Housing Provision. Section 30, Special Permits. Section 31, Floodplain Overlay District. Section 32, Hawthorne West. Section 34, congregate and independent housing for the elderly. Section 36, assisted living residences. Section 37, sign bylaw. Section 40, definitions. Table 1, table of allowable uses. Table 2, table of dimensional requirements, residential. The public hearing was advertised on November 9th, 2023 and November 16th, 2023. And a public notice for the proposed amendments can be found in the office of the town clerk. Good evening.
That was a mouthful.
It was.
We've been busy.
And now we have the staff presentation.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
And
Josh.
welcome everybody here and everybody at home. So I'm going to be going through the 3 zoning bylaw changes or articles that's going to be before the special town meeting February 5th, 2024. So first we're going to talk about MBTA 3A zoning. We've had 2 public info sessions about this, so this is going to be a refresher for some, new for some others. We'll have some feedback specifically about that. The second article is an adaptive reuse article. This is a tool in the tool belt for historic preservation by reusing historic structures for modern purposes. And then we have a housekeeping article that the chair mentioned about all the sections that we're touching. So it's a lot of sections that we're touching, but they are minor. We're going to go through them kind of at a high level, and then we're going to obviously open it up if anyone has any further questions. All of these bylaw changes, amendments, are on the planning board's website. So if you go to the Danvers ma.gov and go to boards and committees planning board, on the left, you'll see a special town meeting icon when you go to the planning board website, and it has all of the documents that you can review. So we're just going to go straight into the MBTA changes. So this is based on a state legislation that is encouraging MBTA communities to adopt zoning districts where multifamily units, which are projects that are developments that have at least 3+ units, where it's permitted as of right. This is based on the need to create about 200,000 new units by 2030 in the Boston metro region and longstanding pushback of density from many communities in the Boston metro area. So in terms of non-compliance, if we don't comply with this new state law, we're not the main thing for us is that we're not eligible for local capital projects funds, MassWorks, or the community one-stop application grant funding. The types of projects that the town could use that grant funding for are complete streets design as well as implementation, corridor studies like what's on the horizon on the Endicott corridor study, wayfinding and signage, bicycle and pedestrian plans, economic development studies for downtown, business improvement districts, master plan, transit-oriented development plans, as well as street reconstruction. So these grants range anywhere from $20,000 to $4 million. and are available to us on a annual basis. If it's a very competitive grant program, but if we don't comply, we are not eligible to apply. Currently, we just recently applied for a transportation master plan this summer. We found out 3 weeks ago that we actually did not receive funding for this. So we're actually looking at other potential grants and also to apply again. We're still compliant at the moment, so we do want to actually apply again through the One Stop in order to make our application more competitive. So the planning department, as well as senior leadership, committed to pursuing compliance, but not without feedback from boards, committees, and residents, with an eventual adoption by town meeting in February of '24. Part of compliance is showing an economic feasibility analysis that has been completed by RKG Associates. The final draft will be posted this week, showing that our zoning as proposed is able to produce an economically viable building. So what the law says is that we must zone for at least 10% of our total units. So we have about 11,700 units here in town. So that's 11,700 units in town. So it's about 1,176 units that we have to zone for. That doesn't mean we need to build, but we need to have an area where that many units could potentially fit. The minimum density for this area has to be at least 15 units per acre. This is in the regulations for the law. So not actually in the law, but it's in the subsequent regulations of the law. So Danvers is an adjacent MBTA community. This means we have no transit, but we are adjacent to cities and towns that do have transit, such as Beverly and Salem. So if transit did actually exist, and we're not talking about a bus, like an actual commuter rail or light rail, we would need to create 20% of our total units. So we would have to create, 2,400 units. We would have to create a district that could handle 2,400 units. So we are not, since we don't have transit, it's only 10% of total units. The other requirement is that this area for this concentrated development would have to be at least 50 acres in size. If we make that larger, we actually lower the density, because if we were trying to cram 1,176 units into 50 acres, if we were going to try to do 100 acres, then that density would be lower, 1,176 over 100, so it'd be half as dense. Like I just said, it had to be in an area. The area for this zone has to be in a concentrated development area, such as the Denver's town center. So this map should look familiar. So town meeting 2 years ago adopted the Danvers Town Center and High Street zoning districts with the MBTA Communities Act requirements top of mind. However, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities final guidelines that were actually published in 2022 and then updated 2 times in 2023. That's what actually, like I said, included the minimum densities that were not included in the law. But as I said, in 2020, the zoning was written completely with this law in mind in order to try to comply. So where we are, so this is the proposed district is the entirety of the downtown. So the blue, the red, the orange, and the green area. All in total, this is about 87 acres, so it's a little bit more. If we were to try to condense it just to 50 acres, the average density would go from 15.1 units per acre, which is where we are proposed to be at under the current densities. If we were to just do 50 acres, try to shrink the district, the density would be up to about 24 units. So we just decided not to shrink or enlarge the district at all, just keep it downtown, put everything right there downtown, which is about 87 acres. So this is actually the crux of the changes downtown, which are the densities. So the special permit or the maximum densities are not changing in any district. So the maximum densities, the special permit here, is all on the right side of all of these slash marks. So this is the by right, what you can do by right in the downtown live work, and then what you can do by special permit. What we have to do is make the by right densities equivalent to what's allowed in the law. So I'm going to go through these changes pretty quickly. So in the High Street mixed use corridor, the by right density is going to go from 20 to 24. The Maple Street, so this is actually the 40R. This is actually being built. There's vertical construction right now. If you've been out there on Maple Square or Maple Street, so this is pretty much the entirety of that blue area that we looked at earlier. That's going from a by right of 20 to 28. And then this is for mixed use buildings. So this whole lower level is mixed use buildings. And then this whole level here is for multifamily. So that has to be 3+. So what we've heard throughout the process is that from feedback from not just boards and committees, but also residents as well, is that we want to incentivize more mixed use structures. So the idea is that you get a higher density for a mixed use building compared to the by right option for no commercial on the first floor. So you can see the numbers here are changing. This is the lowest amount of change that we can do in order to be compliant. So the minimum is 15, and using these numbers here, we come to 15.1. If we change any of the numbers to go any lower, it gets below 15. And again, the maximum density is not changing here. It's still 36 anywhere in town. That's the highest special permit density that's allowed. You can actually apply for a waiver through the planning board when you are in front of them to go higher than 36, but that's, we will still say that the maximum density is not changing, because any number that's in any bylaw, you can always apply to go outside of it. No guarantees you'll get it, but we're still saying the maximum density is not changing. So a typical lot downtown is about 1/3 of an acre. So what this slide is trying to show is that on average, it's going to be about an addition of 1 to potentially 2 units per lot of a project. So this is not an extremely large, massive density change in terms of what we're proposing. Right now, you could do, as the math goes, if you're doing a 1/3 of an acre, the current is 12 units per acre in some areas. So that comes to about 3.66 units. And then if in the proposal to go to 15 units per acre, it goes up actually less than 1 unit. So the idea is that whatever is current, the proposal is only about, on an average of a 0.3 acre lot, it's only about 1 more unit per lot or per project. So under all circumstances, we don't see this as an extremely large change. We see this as a tweak to a very good goal that that town meeting passed. This is very, 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 very close to what was. I'm sorry. The zoning that was passed in 2020 was extremely close to the actual density, even though there was no density number listed at the time. So it was a really good guess to try to peg how dense we should be. And it turns out we were extremely close and really only missed it by about 1. So outside of the density, there are a few other changes that we needed to make in order to become compliant with this law. One is we can't regulate how large a dwelling can be. Currently, there's a whole bunch of math related to how big the minimum dwelling unit size can be. You can't do that under the current law. The other thing is that we currently require commercial on the first floor in many areas of downtown. We cannot require commercial on the first floor with we have to be able to have a by right option for residential only. So we can't force commercial to be on the first floor, unfortunately. So that needs to be changed. The other is that so the parking for the most part is not changing, but I'm just going to go through the one thing that is changing. So currently, it's 1 space per unit for studios and 1 bedrooms apartments. That's unchanged. That's what's on the books now. That's the proposal. For 2 bedroom units, it's 1.5 spaces. That's what's on the books now. That's what our proposal is as well. So that's not changing. The only thing that's changing is for bedrooms that have 3+ bedrooms or more. Instead of being 2 spaces per unit, this is 1.5 spaces per unit. So it's for those few larger units for example, most of Maple Square, for example, almost all of those are studios 1s and 2s. There's a few 3 bedrooms. There's, I don't know if you know offhand, Josh, but it's less than 10, I would imagine.
For sure. I think it's
The 3 bedrooms they're harder to sell. They're a little bit harder to build. In general, you're just not going to find a lot of them. So we don't think that is going to be a major change either. That is all of the nuts and bolts of the MBTA changes. I know I went through those really quickly. The floor, I guess I'll give it back to the chair to open it up to the floor for any questions.
Any questions from the board? Tori?
Just a clarification on the pedestrian frontage zones. Is this state law that's requiring this change?
That's correct.
And so we've replaced language to the effect of shall be required with should be encouraged. Does encouraged have a lot of meaning in our bylaw?
No. But how it actually is encouraged is through the density. So, the carrot here is that if you just want to do residential only, you can do 16 units per acre. If you are going to put commercial on the first floor, you can do 20 units per acre. So the words, frankly, you're right. They, or I don't know if you said that, but they don't mean a ton, because before they were requiring it. Now we're saying we can't require it. However, we're trying to incentivize it as much as we can, without blowing this number up. Meaning, instead of like if this was 32, like potentially inappropriate, right? So trying to find that balance was difficult.
Thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Lou?
Yeah, just a question in terms of, sort of picking up on Tori's question. So just in terms of the pedestrian frontage zone, I mean, what would be the practical effect of that in terms of, in terms of because I know looking at the language in terms it talks about, pedestrian oriented and active ground floor uses. So does that mean that it's that potentially we have a less pedestrian friendly area? I'm just want to try to understand it a little better.
Sure. So
We're encouraging it still.
yeah, we're encouraging it through financial means. We're allowing a higher amount of output financially, which, there are other ways to incent it, but from what I'm picking up what you're saying is, well, let's say if someone has a very small parcel, it's pretty hard to put commercial on the first floor to begin with.
Right.
I might as well just make that, residential only. What does that do to the streetscape?
Right.
So this is something that many planners and many residents of all different types of town centers all over Massachusetts are like, this is really important. Like so you're picking up on something that many people are picking up on. We don't know, I guess, of any other potential tools, and this is actually a point of contention with the state.
Okay.
So we felt the best way to do it was just to try to incentivize it as much as we can, because we can't require it.
Okay. Okay. And what's the concern, I guess, that these other communities are having is this, that you'll have that the streetscape will just be sort of just like a hodgepodge or something?
Not enough public doors.
Yeah.
So not enough. Lots of, you'll be staring at a lot of curtains is the dead space. So I shouldn't say that, people will be living there, but I think you understand what I mean. So as far as, and that was the whole point of the pedestrian frontage zone to begin with, is saying, this is not like you have to do this. And many downtowns thrive because of it. So you bring up a good point, but we just don't know how else to bake the cake here.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Gene, questions? Mike?
Just a quick question. There's a comment about concentrated development like Danvers Town Center. How is that exactly defined, and like how did you guys decide where the area was going to be located, or like is a certain distance from a certain population, or how does that work?
I might pass this to Josh at the time. So, so in 2020, when the town center rezoning was happening, again, this was written to be this area of concentrated development. I don't know if other areas were contemplated. So that if they weren't, then they weren't. But
I don't think that we never really discussed internally any other place that, for us to comply with this, downtown is, an appropriate place, it is an appropriate, from a planning perspective, an appropriate place. So there wasn't a lot of internal discussion about.
Speak up a little. We got background
Yep.
noise.
There wasn't a lot of internal conversation about any other options, really. I think we were so close to complying with the zoning that was passed in February of 2020 that we just kind of focused on tweaking this.
So is there no definition of concentrated
There
development specifically?
there might be from the state. I could send it to you.
was curious.
Yeah, I'm sure that there probably is some kind of, there probably is, but I could send it to you tomorrow.
So could this area expand or change in the future, or is it set once it's decided here?
Yeah.
so we can change it for sure as long as it's compliant, meaning that it can't get less than 50 acres. It has to have all the 15 it can be compliant. It's totally flexible. The one thing I have heard is like, well, why not put this area, for instance, near Liberty Tree Mall? This is what I've heard a lot. And frankly, like right now, in order to have, one of the biggest things that came out of the strategic Danvers planning initiative, as well as the 2020 rezoning of downtown, was that people are all in on trying to put more investment downtown specifically and first. So over Liberty Tree, over other places, because it's a tangible thing that people want to hang out in, rather than Endicott Street, for example. So,
Thank you.
Tim, questions?
I just have one question looking at the red line about the section that was taken out about non-conforming retrofits, where I'm reading it very quickly, but it seemed like if you were retrofitting an old building, it was previously saying you'd need to comply with the minimums, but now that's been struck out. Is there a reason for that?
yeah. Well, okay, go for it.
I believe the wording or language that you're referring to isn't, it's in section 18. It's not necessarily associated with the MBTA community, but that was sort of a staff conversation that we've had internally, in that it was sort of, in terms of doing a redevelopment of a non-conforming project, it was pretty limiting, in that you could only, as it says, you could only go up to the by right number. So if someone was trying to do a project for an older structure, an older building, it kind of, it was, I'm not sure at the time that, I sort of understand the policy. It was trying to limit units, but it was just something that we're proposing right now, as part of like the housekeeping piece, that staff would be in favor of just removing it, because then it doesn't even allow. It basically kind of handcuffs someone who has a pre-existing non-conforming structure or building. They wouldn't even have the ability to, if you wouldn't have the ability to even ask for the special permit with that language. Where, if, for instance, if you were doing a brand new building, you could ask up to 36 an acre in several parts of downtown, but that language, we just felt like it was kind of limiting. So we're just at this time proposing to eliminate it. We're open to not eliminating it or modifying it, but that was the sort of motivation or reasoning for taking it out.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Just to add a little bit to that as well, if you completely limit the amount of what you can do for a pre-existing non-conforming anything, whatever it is. It's basically you're promoting more demolition, more tear down. So this basically gives people an option to work with the current building to even apply for a higher density. It kind of didn't make, it kind of was working backwards, and I guess personally, I didn't see the value. It should be, if anything, you should be allowed to maybe even go higher to incentivize the saving of that building, for example.
Okay, at this time, I'd open up the questions from the audience. If you do have a question, I'd ask you to use the microphone and identify yourself. Any questions? Jim? Go right ahead.
Good evening. Jim Simon, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 7. All the changes that are in this are just so that we can comply and get those grants that were mentioned at the beginning, correct? And is it worth our while, are those grants, do we get that much money from those grants to make it worth our while to change all of this character-based zone that we had voted on at town meeting? The whole thing about the no more than 24 units per building, and for some reason, the square footage of a single bedroom and one bedroom, all of that is gone. I think we've lost our intent here. The buildings can be any size now, is what you just said. So I think we should look at the intent that the town meeting voted on in 2020 and what we're doing here, and is it worth our while? And that's
Yeah,
it.
I think you made a couple incorrect statements. I'm going to
Okay,
let
perhaps,
Brian respond to that. But again, the town meeting has an opportunity to vote on this again.
right,
So we're passing it on to town meeting.
okay.
This is something that, as was addressed, I think, at the last meeting, that the vast majority of towns are, I think there might be one or two towns out of 100 that may not pass this in order to get state aid, which filters down to the towns, but on the dimensional requirements are still in there. You can't build any size building. You still are limited in the height and dimensions. So, but I can let Brian address
Okay,
those direct
all right.
questions.
So, okay, the way I interpreted looking at this, that wasn't the case. And I'm sorry, I got another meeting to be at, so Brian will fill me in on what's going on.
Sure.
Thank you.
I guess very briefly, I'll say, yeah, the maximum density is not changing. So it's not like you can build anything you want anywhere in downtown. So the maximum allowed is not changing. It's the minimum allowed, essentially, that is changing. So the one thing that we took out was the dwelling unit size. So that's, it building code should follow. I've put it this way. I've not seen any other zoning bylaws, let's say I've looked at 30, that limit the size of how big or small a unit can be. That's just not a normal thing. That's not going to go very well over a town meeting or anyone else, just as saying nobody else does this. Like that's not a good reason. I understand that. But the intent was to somehow limit the size, but it didn't, it was actually just more complicated math to go through for no, I didn't see the purpose of it. You're still governed by the amount of units that you can produce in a building. The other was that maximum that they're changing to have nothing would have to do with you can only put a maximum of 24 units in a building. But if the building is still the same size, why would that matter? Meaning that if everyone's concerned about how the size and scale of a building, the height and density is actually what governs the volume of that building. So you could still have 25 units in there or 40 units in there, but in terms of what you're looking at, what you have to deal with, that type of thing, it's all the same. So the bulk of the buildings are not changing dramatically here. The height's not changing, the max density is not changing. It's just the minimum that's allowed that's changing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions from the audience? All right, hearing none. I think we're going to move on to additional zoning changes, moving off the MBTA changes.
So I'm going to briefly discuss one of the second of the third warrant articles is something that we've discussed in the past, is this tool in the toolbox is what we say is called adaptive reuse. And we had talked about this in the past year and a half, with the idea of, potentially saving some historic structures in town, historic buildings in town, where maybe someone or developer or property owner, resident, has an old building or a structure, wants to save the structure, but, from a financial or, for any other reason, it doesn't, in order to save the building or structure, in its current use, it might not work out. So, we've been talking about this, like I said, a year and a half plus, with this idea. And so I guess I'm going to just go some of the tweaks that were, some of the kind of, the eligibility for a building to apply for it is that the building or structure has to be built prior to 1890. And in order to go through with an adaptive reuse, it has to receive a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. A previous iteration of this was, in sort of not contentious, but previously it was very, very open-ended. You could almost propose any use. We've sort of tried to scale that back a little bit, just for, just probably more appropriate. The only kind of uses that you could propose would have to at least be uses that are currently in our use table today. And in going through the special permit process with the ZBA, an applicant or developer would also have the ability to request a waiver regarding the parking and other dimensional components. I know that the historic preservation and historic ad hoc committee has sort of been discussing this item. We're proposing it to go in section 30, our special permit section. I think that's all. I'm not sure if the chair or Lou, being on that committee, you had any other comments about that, but it's pretty straightforward from my point.
Just to add, in terms of I know one of the issues we're looking at in terms of, sort of as you alluded to, was the, I know as a member of the ad hoc committee, we were looking sort of at the age of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that was something that, I know even in a previous iteration of this, there was a concern of just sort of, I guess, the breadth of potential buildings that could, be used for adaptive reuse. And, we have we have neighborhoods that may have been developed post 1890, early 1900s, 1920s. So I think the concern was sort of getting an earlier date, and prior to 1890, was to sort of address really the need that we see in terms of buildings that sort of could benefit from this, while at the same time, I guess out of a concern as well that that it's not overbroad. And the zoning, the allowed uses as well. So I know that was something that we talked about in terms of whether something would be allowed. It's among the table of uses that's allowed. But for example, if something is not allowed under zoning code, it can't be done. Is that right?
It seems like how it's written from my perspective that you would be able to at least request, let's just say, for example, R1, residential 1, like neighborhood store. Like right now as we speak, like neighborhood store isn't allowed in R1. How I read it or interpret it and how it's kind of written, you could request to do a neighborhood store but are you saying that's...
But a neighborhood store is allowed within our table,
Yes.
within table of uses.
Yes.
But if it's a use which is not allowed, then for example, like a recreational marijuana dispensary, something like that, then that would be off the table.
Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying.
Is that right?
Yeah, sure, yes.
Yeah, just to clarify, it's basically, if it's allowed anywhere in town,
Right.
you can apply that. If it's specifically not allowed anywhere in town, you can't apply for it. So this basically gives the property just an added benefit to do a use in order to keep the property, pump money into the property to make it live longer, essentially. So
Exactly. And then all being said, it still has to go through the special permit process.
Exactly, yes. Which, it's a fairly high bar, 4 to 5 members of the ZBA for non-housing issues. So, not sure if there's any other questions or comments on
Questions
this-
from the board?
on this
Anyone?
one.
Cory?
So I want to bring something up that I brought up, I think it was last year, on this issue. The role of planning board versus ZBA. So first question is, hypothetically, ZBA grants special permit for this, then we would be tasked with site plan review, given that the use is now approved for this particular property. Is that correct?
But Brian said yes. So I guess so. Yeah. Especially if it meets like the site in section 4, it meets any of those triggers. I wouldn't see how it wouldn't, have to come back to the planning board for site plan review.
I know there are other cases where there are special permits we can grant that allow a different use. Contractor's yard comes to mind. Are there also situations where the ZBA has special permits they can grant like this, or would this be
Yeah.
a new role for the
Yeah.
ZBA?
So generally, how the bylaw is set up is that, this is kind of a general statement, but the majority of residential special permits or, special permits given in residential zoned districts are, the ZBA is the special permit granting authority. And generally, like the commercial special permits in commercially zoned zoning districts go to the planning board. Like 90% plus each of those kind of buckets. That's sort of how the use table is set up now, as we speak. So the ZBA does fairly often give special permits for. They right now as we speak, they do give use variances, but they also they do give residential. I don't know how often or.
So where this would be unusual would be in commercial districts.
What's that? I'm sorry.
Where this might be unusual would be in commercial districts where
Yes, that's true.
we would be faced with a site plan review without having had any input into the use variance.
just want to get the terminology correct here. So this is definitely not a use variance. We're making it very clear that this, even though it's acting like a use variance, this is a special permit. It's a special permit for a use specifically for a for an adaptive reuse. So, but the answer is yes. You may be in front. There might be a site plan review in front of you for a commercial property where there's a building that's trying to go through this special permit, and the ZBA could have approved the use, and now they're just coming to you for a site plan review, and so yeah, you could be, your hands could be somewhat tied. Yes.
To the rest of the board, are you all comfortable with that? I'm honestly not sure if I am or not.
The only thing I can say is that there are plenty of projects that get kind of approved first by the ZBA and then go to site plan review
Yeah,
for this. So to be honest, I don't really see this as a large departure from routine business.
Yeah, I was going to add, yeah, because this could be similar, I think, because we have site plan review where they go before ZBA for a dimensional variance or some other. you know,
Right,
phys-
yeah.
I would say actually, I don't know the percentage. It's probably actually very high or quite high that of a project that's gone to the CPA for a finding, for a dimensional variance or some other type of permit, and their second stop is with the planning board for site plan review. It's actually very common.
So I'm not concerned about it. I mean, I appreciate the point, but I think that since there's precedent for sort of a similar approach, I think that seems all right.
Okay. Questions from the audience on this particular article? No. Moving on. Josh?
So this one's a little bit more of a bear because it covers a lot of ground. We're not doing a lot of changes, but it covers a lot of ground. It touches a lot of sections. So we're going to kind of go through the major changes of each section, and we'll see how it goes here.
And
So-
Brian, just as a forward, the changes are a result of feedback from town staff and the building inspector and stuff. These are types of changes that we do every few years, just because in practice, using the articles, there's some issues with them. Is that what you're, kind of the reasoning for this?
Yeah. So I can just go through. Yeah. So you've hit on most of them. So some of it is the way that the town has always interpreted something, but when you actually look at the language, it doesn't say exactly that way. So we're maybe like fine tuning some language, not to change policy, but to reflect current policy, if that means anything. So there's a lot of that. There's also a lot of internal consistency where you might have two things referencing a wrong section, or one's right, one's wrong. So like really kind of clean up stuff. The goal from the beginning was not to do policy changes. We will go through, there are very minor, but there are a couple of changes that are legitimate changes that we're gonna go through. So the purpose of this housekeeping article, about 3 years ago, the building commissioner and the zoning enforcement officer, so 3 years and previous to that, it was under one roof. So there was really no distinction between the building commissioner and the zoning administrator, or known as the zoning enforcement officer. Those are now two different roofs. So now zoning compliance is actually under our division, and the building commissioner is under the building commissioner. So the idea is that, there was a whole bunch of changes when it just refers to the building commissioner or the zoning administrator, and we're just making sure that everyone has the right hat on there. Another reason to do this article was, again, to provide consistent language throughout, clarity where there's vagueness. And a big thing here is conformance with current state and specifically case law. So there's been a lot of case law over the past 30 years, and we just have literally that long, and we have not really been updating specific language. Really that's what it is. We're using, I wouldn't say incorrect language, but just antiquated.
And we used, was there a grant, or we used, was it Mark Bobrowski?
So yeah, this
who's
is
an
so.
expert to help us.
Yeah, so this was, if some people in this room know who Mark Grabowski is, most don't. So he's an extremely accomplished land use attorney that literally wrote the book on land use law in Massachusetts. We were very lucky to be working with him. So he helped us through specifically this housekeeping article. He was not involved with MBTA. He was not involved with adaptive reuse, just this behemoth. So moving signage. So every single different district had its own signage regulations. It was very confusing going back and forth. So we're just not changing any policy, just putting all those into one section for signage. So you have a question about signage, you go to the signage bylaw. Okay, so now I'm going to go through each of the sections. This is a little heavy in terms of the amount. So just fair warning, I'm just going to go through this and here we go. So section 1. So this is something that we're actually, again, this was, I'm not going to say this every time, but almost all of these things were brought on by our consultant, our land use attorney consultant. So one, as part of the purpose of the bylaw. So when this is section 1, this is section 1 of the entire bylaw of what does this zoning bylaw do? One of them is saying to conserve the value of land and structures, including the conservation of open space. So we can't really use, this is through case law, can't really use the words conserving the value of land because it's way too subjective. Many lawsuits have been based on this, and it's basically you can't do it. So he suggested very, very strongly that we take it out. Section 3, so these are all general provisions. So this has to do with non-conforming situations, so non-conforming uses and structures, as well as single and 2-unit non-conforming structures. So all of these sections, this is actually one of the only real changes. So I'll highlight this right now. So reconstruction after voluntary demolition. So you're demolishing a house and you're going to build outside of the footprint on a non-conforming property. So the property's already non-conforming, you're tearing down it completely and you're making it bigger. That is now going to be a special permit. Previously, it was a finding. So that goes from a 3 vote to a 4 vote. If you're just expanding, that's still a finding. That's much more routine. Again, this has to do more with the distinction between a tear down and an expansion. Back to case law here is that there really has to be a distinction in terms of how much severity and how much care is given to that. So that's why a 4-person vote, a 4 out of 5 vote is required when there's a tear down involved, and a 3 out of 5 vote is required for an expansion. If it's just an expansion, you're not tearing it down. So that is honestly that is probably one of the largest changes out of this entire article. So it is not a very large change, but it is definitely a change. We don't have to do it. It is something that makes sense according to case law. So again, previously that was a finding. Case law sees reconstruction as different from alteration. So just reiterating what I just said there. Site plan review. So site plan review in Danvers has always been known as a public meeting, not a public hearing. That is incorrect. We are changing that. The site plan decision must be filed with the town clerk 90 days from the close of the public hearing. Currently, it's can't be more than 60 days from the time of the application. This is a very tight timeline, 60 days. So if you apply on day 1, you get heard on day 30. That means you have to come back each time asking for a continuance, not just a continuance, that you have to have an extension of the deadline, not a continuance. And the extension of a deadline for something that takes 2 or 3 months is not normal. That is not typical amongst other processes around Massachusetts. So instead, the site plan decision, the action has to be now from the close of the public hearing. There has to be action from the board from that date. So that's a change of the date. That we've essentially been we haven't been keeping up with what is current practice around Massachusetts. So this is now changing it to current practice. Section 9. So this is new language. So this is, I think this was just ended up being a wordsmithing. Yeah. So this is, so in addition to those specified below, other accessory uses are allowed provided they meet the definition of accessory use, which is a use that is incidental and subordinate to the principal use and located on the same lot. So accessory use was defined, and this is just tightening up the language. No change in policy here. Off-street parking standards, this is just condensing language, allowing the planning board to waive requirements. The planning board has always been allowed to waive requirements. That is not something new. This is just condensing the language over, I think instead of 7 paragraphs, it's now only 3. Section 18, so this is the downtown zoning. So even though this is still part of housekeeping, because there was a downtown zoning affordable housing provision and then a whole town housing provision, which doesn't make sense. We just have one provision. It's for the whole town. It doesn't matter where you are. So we're just making that clear now and just having it in one place. It's not, the downtown affordable housing provision was not meant to be different from the rest of the town, and it isn't. We're just now taking it out of the downtown and referencing the one section for affordable housing. So this is just condensing it into one place. No policy change. This I talked about earlier. Was, in section 22, it's referring to the building commissioner instead of zoning administrator. This is several easy ones here. So adding the word overlay throughout the entire section for the groundwater protection district bylaw, simply because of the definition of an overlay district. We just talked about, actually, I guess this is kind of twice. So we talked about section 18 and section 29. Basically, section 18 now is referencing section 29. So now we're merging that original language. So everything is in one place. Nothing new there. Section 30, special permits. I'll give this to Josh. Yep.
This is it's not necessarily a policy change, but this, in working with Mr. Bobrowski, kind of his case law, and he's sort of, in his like kind of expertise on this matter, he offered, this language to replace our special permit criteria. In substance, it's actually quite similar. He just is, this is kind of the language that he proposed to us. So like I said, it's not a policy change. I think right now we have 7 criteria. Now we have 6. But if you reviewed what we currently have and you kind of did like a match, there's a lot of very similar words and very similar criteria for a special permit. Let me see. This one's pretty straightforward in the whole section. We're just changing one word. Brian alluded, we're just, one of the things that our office has been, especially in our office, Brian Cassidy does a lot of signage work, review and analysis, and he, I believe this one's from Brian. He, he offered this language that maybe we should probably add the time that you could have sort of like as a temporary sign. It was like just 10 days. So we're proposing just to just increasing the number of days for temporary signs, especially for like businesses that just open. These were some of the sections that some of the zoning districts where we simply are grabbing like the signage from these districts and then just placing it, copying and pasting it into the signage section of the bylaw. No changes, just copy paste. In terms of section 40 in definitions, this particular definition was just referencing the wrong section. As we move the affordable housing from 18 to 29, we just want to make sure that it's referencing the right section. And then in terms of the dimensional table, at the end of the book, end of the bylaw, there's just these couple items. Currently, accessory uses has a height of 10. We're proposing to modify that to 20. And then we are trying to, although as we read it, maybe not as much, but we're trying to clarify that footnote 3 because there's sort of a standard size for sheds, and we're trying to make it so sheds of a standard size don't have to, have different setbacks. So these are sort of like these two from the dimensional table are more what do I say, in practice or day-to-day things that we see day-to-day that it's more where we sit administratively when we're reviewing things. These two just kind of give clarity when residents come in with questions. So that's, although there's several word pages in redlined, we went to that fairly quickly. Those were the what we're calling the housekeeping items. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? Tim?
Generally don't, this all seems pretty straightforward. I had one question actually that sort of connects the first topic with this one, which was the accessory use section. Just out of curiosity, it looked like an additional sort of accessory dwelling unit wasn't covered in that language. Just thinking about zoning density, does additional dwelling units count towards the density if you were getting approval for that?
Not sure.
So thinking like an in-law apartment above a garage, right?
Right, so ADUs do count as units. But when you're talking about density, you're talking about downtown density, or are you talking about some other?
Well, just in general, just curious.
Well, because there's not a lot of density. The question doesn't really enter outside of the downtown because you don't really have density requirements downtown. You have single family. You have allowed uses like single family homes, 2 families, 3 families, that type of thing. ADUs would generally only allowed in 1 and 2 family homes, or on one. That's generally what's probably going to happen through the state. So there is state legislation that's that's been introduced by the governor, that has to go through both sides, House, House and Senate, the state House and Senate. In terms of what's going to happen there, I don't, I think, well, I guess to your point, accessory dwelling units do count as density. The only place that really would be like single and 2 family homes in the downtown, which there are decent amount. But that's where the rubber would meet the road, I guess. Because outside of it is just you're allowed to do an ADU on a single or a 2 family.
Well, it didn't look like dwelling unit was covered under the accessory use. It was like garage, tool shed. Didn't say anything about a dwelling unit.
Okay, I misunderstood your question.
Yeah.
So, accessory uses generally are generally having to do with building, structures that are incidental to the principal use of the lot. If the principal use of the lot is a single-family home, an accessory dwelling unit, yes, it's accessory use, but it's still residential. So this is specifically talking about sheds and garages.
Got it.
The what is a little bit strange here. Okay, so right now, accessory uses, there's a height for accessory uses in the R1, 2, and 3. Right now, it's 10 feet. What that means is that, are we talking about garages or are we talking about sheds? It's unclear. So we probably have a lot of people that have a shed that might be 10 feet tall or 8 feet tall, but most garages are much higher than that. Or if not much higher, they're actually, at the moment, allowed to be the same height as the principal structure. That's kind of strange. So you could have a 30-foot tall house, and right now, well, actually, now that we've advertised this, you can't really, but you could have a 30-foot tall garage right now. That seems like that doesn't make a lot of sense. That it should be, using the word accessory, it should be, it should be less than the current, less than what a house would be allowed. So what we're saying is that 10 is too low for a garage. It's probably high enough for a shed. But even if you wanted to put some storage area above there, no one living, just a storage area above a 1.5 story garage, you wouldn't be able to do it. Whereas a 1.5 story garage is perfectly fine. That's not generally a problem for anybody. So we're making that accessory uses going up from basically a garage that can go from 10 feet tall to 20 feet tall.
That means sheds could go to 20 feet tall too? Or is that separate?
Yes,
Technically?
it does mean that. It does mean that.
Thanks.
Yep. Right now, though, they can go to like a garage. You could call it a garage, say it's for vehicles, and it could be 30. It could be 30 feet. You can't go 5 feet from the property line, but you could go whatever that district is. So in the R1, you could be 8 feet. So you could put a 30-foot tall. Right now, you could put a 30-foot tall garage 8 feet from the property line. We think that's potentially inappropriate.
Gene, questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
All right. Lou?
Yeah, just a couple of questions. With respect to section 13, I guess we're talking about reconstruction. And I guess the question I had is, you mentioned that it was reconstruction after, which I guess would be voluntary demolition. And I think I did see language in both in the prior version as well as the red line. I think it covers, in addition, I think that now the proposed language is, I think, catastrophe. So it would include, so when I first saw voluntary demolition, so if your structure is, you didn't intend it, it gets hit by lightning, it burns down, you can
build it by right, proposed and, existing and proposed. If your house burns down, you can build it back by right, period.
Mhm.
Now and in the future.
Okay.
If you're trying to build, if it's involuntary, you have a fire.
Yes.
You can build outside of the footprint through a finding.
Okay.
If it's voluntary, if you are meaning to demolish your house and you're going outside of the footprint, then that is a special permit.
Got it. And is that a full demolition, or is that the
Full
not
full
leaving the
demolition.
wall up, or
That doesn't really exist anyway. I mean, there's no way to, in personal opinion, you can't demolish three walls of a house and say that there's a wall up. That's kind of an old Boston trick that doesn't really exist anymore.
Okay. Got it. Question just with respect to the special permit under section 30. So I guess some of the, and so it seems here as so that the, for example, when I see a special permit, I'm always looking at, for example, adversely affecting the neighborhood. That you're not going, water and sewer systems won't be overloaded by the proposed use. So these are all, in particular, the neighborhood piece, is that sort of covered now under?
So what adequacy of utilities and other public
Yep.
services, so that has to do with stormwater
Sure.
infrastructure. And then this is compatibility with size, scale, and design of other structures in the neighborhood and social structures.
Okay. Social structures.
And I don't really love that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think I will revisit it.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any comments on social structures? Or knows what that means?
No idea.
I mean, I can guess what it could mean, but I'm just not sure what it, I mean, close proximity to a school or something like, I'm.
What it doesn't,
Yeah.
So I'm just, yeah.
sorry, if I may, what it doesn't mean is impact on the value of surrounding properties, which is often something that I think we consider. And I don't see that anywhere in here.
I think if the building or use is not compatible, I think it does cover it. So it doesn't specifically say value because again, we can't really use that but what you can say is that this is incompatible with the surrounding environment.
Right.
Maybe that's the reason why you think that the property value will go lower. Is classic example, don't necessarily agree with. You have a sea of single-family homes, and you're trying to put a 45-unit complex right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
This is totally out of character from that's something, or that it's going to lower our property values. Well, really, the answer is like, we don't care if it's going to lower your property values. That's not how this works. That's not how zoning works.
Okay.
It's incompatible with the with the rest of the neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you rest your hat on. You can't rest your hat on the fact that it may lower your property value, because when it comes down to it, you can't prove it.
Got it. Got it. And would that cover also, in terms of this language, the compatibility? I guess that, would that also cover potential nuisance or hazard as well?
Well, so nuisance would not be involved in this. We don't even need to ever talk about nuisance. Nuisance has its own set of laws that are not necessarily zoning, but
Well, it's currently here, it's currently there now, so it's not appropriate for it to be currently there now, is that?
well, I mean, I think it's specifically the words that we're using, that we don't necessarily need or have to use the word nuisance when it comes to anything. We use the word incompatibility, meaning that's something that you can, it is a little subjective, I will say. It's not complete, but yeah, I mean, this is not nuisance law. I
Right.
mean, I think.
And could that cover, again, I guess, impacts on the natural environment as well? I mean, is that, again,
So, yeah, so impacts on the natural environment are here at number 5.
okay,
So, basically, these 6 things, we feel very strongly that they cover all the things that are currently on the books.
Mhm.
It's just those specific words that were used are not appropriate.
sure,
Yeah.
okay. And so you might be, and I guess what you're saying, though, is you may revisit looking at some wordsmithing on number 4 as it relates to,
I would say that the only potential change that I'm contemplating at the moment is simply getting rid, stopping here. So it says, and design of other structures in the neighborhood, full stop. So I'm contemplating erasing and social structures,
well,
but that's it.
I mean, obviously, it was recommended that social structures be put in there for a reason, so I'd be,
Would they mean like community structures,
yeah,
like a church or a,
church or a school.
I think it's
or-
ambiguous enough.
temple.
It's ambiguous enough that
Yeah.
you could say it's just about anything unless we define it, and that's the problem.
Yep.
So someone could say that, well, this area is there's a whole bunch of kids here. Like, you're going to put a 55 and older place here. Like, you could say that you're ruining the social structure of the fabric of the neighborhood.
Mhm.
Maybe it's incompatible because of the size and scale of the building, but if you're going to, I don't know if it's an appropriate use of the bylaw to stop a project that may or may not make sense, because someone, again, it's not defined. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. So we either have to define it or get rid of it. I think that's my sense, is define it to say, what are we talking about,
Okay.
or get rid of it.
okay. Tori, any further questions?
No.
Questions from the audience? If you identify yourself at the mic, thank you. Mr. Bates?
Good evening, Bill Bates, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. Could we go back to accessory use and just, is limiting the height of a garage from 30 feet to 20 feet, isn't that a major change? And are we being honest and calling it a major change?
I would say it's certainly a change to the bylaw, but when we tell people that they are allowed to go to the principal height, whatever it is of the zoning district, that you can make a garage 30 feet, most people are extremely surprised that they're even able to do that. So I would say, yes, it is a real change. However, in actuality, most people are not building 30-foot garages. Most people, when they build a garage anywhere in town, it's either a 1-story garage or a 1.5-story garage. Now we're certainly seeing more detached EFLAs. So that's something that's coming through. So where you have an EFLA as an extended family living area, kind of like an in-law apartment. So we are seeing it where you have a garage on the first floor, and then essentially a studio or a 1-bedroom above it. But even so, I would say that it is a change in the book for sure that is real. However, most people don't, when they come with their plans showing us their garage, they're not showing us 30-foot garages. It's not something that we see that we have to, that's a problem.
I would just suggest if it's not a problem, let's not change it. You're putting another restriction on somebody's property if they want to have a 30-foot high garage. you got to explain to me why we shouldn't let them have it. You mentioned a 1.5 story, I don't know what that height means, I'm not in the construction business. How many feet would 1.5 stories be?
Probably 15? Is that 15, Brad?
So again, if there's not a problem, I would not support restricting it. And I hope that the board would at least entertain that.
Well, again, someone does have the right, if it was 20, to ask for a variance to go higher, Bill.
I'm right that he could do 30.
Well, it's not defined. It's an undefined thing right now. By practice, not right. So it's undefined in that it's kind of a loophole right now. And I think if we remember what happened on, the little gas station on Wenham Street, if you remember, he put in an enormous garage behind his repair shop. What's his name? Corner of Locust, Royce. So he came in, that's a non-conforming use, and he put an enormous accessory use behind that small little building. And that's what you end up with. So if you were the neighbor, I think you might be a little bit upset that he was able to stick that in as an accessory use. That garage is probably 3 times the size of the building, because it isn't regulated. So we're offering some regulation. If someone legitimately said, okay, you're allowing me 20 feet, and I'm putting an effluent for my mother, and I need 2 more feet. The special permit granting authority is a ZBA anyway, so we're going to ask for 2 more feet. That seems reasonable, but it gives your neighbor the opportunity to say, well, wait, hold on. I can't even see the sun now if it's going to be 30 feet high.
The only thing I would add is the term accessory means subservient. It's subservient to the principal use. If the principal height is 30 feet, the accessory use shouldn't be 30 feet. I think that's the mentality.
And the EFLA is a little different than accessory. The EFLA is separately regulated. So are we,
It's still a residential use also, so it's unclear.
it's not really an accessory use, it's not a garage, it's not a shed, it's not accessory to the, because you're offering bedrooms and the like. So that's regulated on its own under the EFLA statute. So, other questions? Tori?
Clarifying question, is the setback requirement on an accessory use different than that of the primary structure?
Generally, no. The only provision that so we do allow accessory uses to get closer to the property line than the principal setback. So I'm just going to use the R1 as a general, just as an example. So in the R1, you're allowed to have an 8-foot side setback. You can get to 8 feet. However, if your accessory structure is 10 feet or less in height and 120 square feet in area, you can go to 5 feet. So generally, all accessory structures have to adhere to the principal setback. In the R1, it's 8 feet. However, if it's small, 10 feet tall, 120 square feet, you can get to 5.
Garden shed.
Exactly.
Does that work for R2 and R3? No?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
I was just using the 8 foot. The R2 is 20 feet.
But you can go within 5 feet.
If it's 10
120
feet tall
square
and
feet.
120 square feet in area, you can go to 5 feet of the property line.
Right.
Because it's a little 10 by 12 little garden shed, like you said.
Okay.
Different from a 30-foot tall, 2-bay garage that has living space above, for example.
In the current bylaw, it says regarding garages, should not be the predominant design feature when viewed from the street, which is a little hard to define, so I like creating a height limit that is clear and easy to define.
Okay. Other questions from the board? All right. Further information from staff. I know we have another applicant coming in shortly. Do we know what time they're coming?
8 o'clock, I believe, is what I think we had scheduled till 8. It's 7:47. We're pretty close. We didn't have anything else. The only, it's really, we're going to make some final edits. So, we're not at the finish line yet. We got about a month, I think, to still wordsmith and tweak. So anyone who's listening at home or anyone here, we are still accepting feedback. So that is, we will be working on this, taking into consideration as, we've been talking obviously with the ZBA. We are going to be sitting down with certain members of the ZBA as well. They typically don't have business meetings, meaning where this would be talked about in a public hearing, for example. But individual members are allowed to comment to us, and we take that into consideration, and then we bring that back to the planning board. So the state has to review our proposed changes. The goal is that when we go to town meeting in February 5th, we can say the article that's proposed in front of you right now has already been approved by the state as compliant. So that's just with the MBTA specifically. So really, at this point, does anyone need any more additional information to really that would either help you either make a decision or help you make some type of determination on what you may or may not need. But the idea is we got about a month. We don't have a ton of time, but we certainly have enough to kind of bring this, bring every board and committee in as well. That we're obviously going to be having comments from the select board as well. So we're going to be trying to conglomerate all of these over the next month.
So just to refresh, again, we talked about our next meetings are going to be December 12th, January 9th, January 23rd, and then town meeting for these items is February 5th. Sound good? All right. Is there a way that we could get input from anyone online if they're asking questions? Will we know that?
Yeah, there's right now, Jim. I don't see anyone from the public who's joined the meeting right now.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
So question for the board in terms of timeline. So you guys are meeting again on the 12th. Is the idea that at that point you may have comment, or I think it's like, do we want to have another conversation on the 12th? Is it?
I mean, I would ask members of the board, are we good on the MBTA stuff? This is our third meeting?
I think MBTA is okay. Yeah.
And then if there's any...
It's really housekeeping then.
Yeah, if we have any further questions on housekeeping, we can bring them up at that meeting, and then I would entertain a motion to bring it forward to FinCom.
Okay. I may have a personal conflict on the 12th, but Josh is
That's
more
fine.
than capable.
Sure.
Okay, great. Anything else from anybody then before?
Bill, question?
And I had one more question for him, too.
Okay.
Just as a town meeting member, if you could do as much as you could, I think it'll come out in the FinCom hearings and things like that, but I don't understand a lot of zoning and stuff like that. I need to see that. Here's what the bylaw says now, crossed out, here's what it is. I was on the website today, and there's large sections. Section 18 scared me because it was all crossed out. But then you say you're putting it into Section 29 as is. If you can just explain it to us as best you can of what's changing.
Yeah, on that vein, I know we talked about this before, Brian. Are we able to have a PowerPoint at FinCom and also at town meeting? I think it goes a long way than asking people to look at their phones or look at the website, because it's just too cumbersome.
Sure. So, talking with the, Lux director, he definitely thinks it makes a lot of sense for there to be some type of PowerPoint presentation at town meeting for sure. Whether it's in conjunction with the division or the board or conglomeration of the two of us, but something that is, when you're changing this much, like you said, it gets confusing very quickly, and a whole bunch of red line language doesn't help. I totally get that. We've been looking at it for months, and it's kind of second nature. But we know that when we have a paper copy on this desk. Look how thick that is. So that's every change that we're doing. So yeah, it's 200 something pages. We're touching 200 pages, but it's not like we're doing that many changes. But we're like on one page, we might be literally changing 2 words, but it is voluminous.
All right, Lou had one more thing.
Yeah, just one more thing, and just as picking up what we talked about before, with respect to the special permit, section 30, we talked about that whole, social structures section, and I know you mentioned about either that section could be deleted or defined. If maybe for the next meeting, if you could maybe even just take a look to see, what, maybe I'm not sure if you can go back to the consultant, or what, if we can find sort of what social structures is defined at, rather than just cutting it. I want to make sure that there's, if there was a reason that it was there, and if it's necessary to define it, I kind of would be interested in seeing some definitions.
Yeah, like I said, if we would keep it, my strong preference would be to define it.
Okay.
Simply because just having it up there, it's actually some coded language. It's a little strange, to be honest.
Yeah. And so if it is, I mean, then I'd be interested then at least seeing what a definition would be then.
Yeah.
So
No, a clear definition would be great, and I think this is too vague.
that's fine.
Okay, at this time, we're going to have before we take a Mills break, which is another defined term of, certain people know that is in this room. I would ask that we'll take out of order the vote on the minutes
Should we should probably do a motion to continue the public hearing.
on this one here, okay, if you would, Lou.
Yeah. See, a moment here. Motion to continue the public hearing on the zoning bylaw amendments to our next meeting of December 12th.
Second.
Motion made and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none. All right, and taking out of order the meeting minutes, if you could, Lou, as well.
Okay, sure. Let's see, we have the minutes from our planning board meeting of November the 14th. I was not participating in that meeting, so I don't think I should be voting on it. Yes.
Tori, would you make the motion to accept the minutes?
I move that we accept the minutes for the meeting of November 14th, 2023.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jean. All in favor by the attendees, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And one recusal.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, that's it.
I think that's it, yeah.
All right, so a Mills break is defined as a bathroom break. It was brought about, how many years ago? 10, 20 years ago? All right, we're going to take a quick bathroom break while we have our new applicant will be coming in with quite a few people to talk about the Denny's site. So we're going to take about a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Okay. What's that?
Back to the meeting here, item number 2 on the agenda. 152 Endicott Street, request for a roadway improvement plan and a site plan review pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaws submitted by JBM Danvers LLC for property in the Commercial 3 zoning district. The applicant proposes to improve an existing way, Chalet Court, to access a new retail commercial building in a new hotel, Assessors Map 63, Lot 14. Before we start, I did talk with staff, and maybe Josh, you want to just comment on what we're going to review this evening?
Yeah, so I thought the development team could give sort of an update on where things stand in conversations with potentially the abutters.
You got to talk a little louder. It's
Sorry, yeah. The development team could just kind of give an update and overview of where things stand today, including potentially just where things stand with the abutters, and also we don't have draft decisions with us tonight, but we just wanted to, we'd like to hear an update from them and talk through the board any other kind of remaining items that we have. So
we won't be voting on the project this evening. Are we going to be bifurcating the decision between the building out front, the Fidelity building, and the rear building?
There's 2 decisions. There's a roadway improvement plan and a site plan decision, and in both and or in one of them, over the next 2 weeks, as we put decisions together, they will include conditions and language that we could talk through all of this.
Okay. All right, great. You have the floor.
Good evening, Chairperson Sears, members of the Planning Board. Frank Marinelli again for the record. Happy to be back here with the board. And we have with us tonight our development team, Pete Doucette, who is the Director of Development for Torrington Properties. Also, we have Bob Clark from Allen Major, our project civil engineer, and Greg Michaelitis, who's our consulting engineer. Jeff Dirk is also available by Zoom if there's any questions on traffic. We've covered all of that in the past hearings. It's been peer reviewed, as you know. But just to cover the things that Josh brought up, the status is, as you know, it's about a 4.3 acre site. It's in the C3 zone. The uses that we're proposing are uses by right, the 10,000 approximate square foot building for Fidelity. We do have a time deadline on that to deliver that building, so that's important for the town. The investment that we're making here is approximately $20 million at a derelict site, completely blighted with a vacant Denny's and a vacant Days Inn, as the board knows. So it's all improvements for not only the town in terms of the road that Torrington would be building at its expense, in addition to providing the investment for the commercial tax base, but also we've worked with our abutter. Since the last meeting, as we told you, we would get together with Attorney McCann and her client. We did meet on November 15th at Scott Cameron's office, the engineer for the abutters, and we discussed the interests of 160, 180, and 182 in Endicott with respect to the redevelopment here at 152 Endicott. And we had a very good meeting. I then sent Attorney McCann a draft agreement for the proposed improvements to their property at 180. Today, Attorney McCann and I again spoke. She had some revisions. I think, as she said in an email to me, we're very, very close. And we understand that and of course I'll let Attorney McCann is here and will speak, but my understanding is that we do have agreement that they are in support of the project so long as all of the improvements shown on the plans that have been filed, we filed revised plans on November 17th, so long as those improvements are constructed prior to any CO, certificate of occupancy for Fidelity, then that would be a requirement that I think that Attorney McCann wants in the certificate of approval. And also, secondly, that we would finalize the agreement that I spoke about. So With that, I think it's appropriate to turn it over to Bob, and he can go through the improvements.
Thank you. If we could all just speak up a little bit, there's a lot of background noise behind us with different things running on. It's hard to hear a little bit, and people in the back, I think, also struggle a little
For the
bit.
record, Bob Clark from Allen Major Associates. Is that good?
Yep,
All right.
thank you.
Josh, could you move to the next slide? So this is Chalet Court. As Attorney Frank mentioned, we have a draft easement with the abutters on 160 and 180. That's the old Bed Bath & Beyond and the Salem 5 and the McDonald's lot. So the access has been moved down from where it was coming directly off of Endicott Street. That is now a 30-foot wide drive road. That's two 15-foot wide lanes. The sidewalk all the way along the entire left side of the Chalet Court. We have a sidewalk coming down and a main boulevard coming down to their facility, as you can see on the screen. The agreement is to put all of the curbing that is shown on that plan in place on their property, the sidewalk, and then seal coat and paint the striping that is to the right of that boulevard. ADA accessible curb ramps, crosswalks, and we also have a connection to Salem 5. There's apparently an easement from Salem 5 with the Bed Bath & Beyond. They do actually park across the way there, so that was a big request. We have truck turning secondary access to the rear that will be able to circulate all the way around. That's been peer reviewed by your peer review consultant. All the peer review comments have been addressed. All of the city staff comments have been addressed. The road goes back to a 24-foot wide right at the throat at our property entering into the site. So those are the main changes to that plan for Endicott and Chalet Court, and the access to the site. Josh, could you go to the next slide? Another change that's been made is a 27 square foot easement at Endicott location at the top of the screen in front of Fidelity. That is 35 feet by 77 feet for the municipal sewer pump station. That was originally down at the corner of Chalet Court and the mobile station access to the rear. So that's been moved up there. We've shown a layout. We've sent that over to city engineer. And then we're calling two phases so that we want to get going quickly on phase one with Fidelity, and then the second building, the 15,000 square foot, would be phase two. Most likely, we would do pad-ready site in that location, but the main point is to get Fidelity in place. So we're looking to move forward with conditions of approval in the next 2 weeks and have this approved on December 12th. With that, I'll turn it over for any questions or comments. Jeffrey Dirk is available, our traffic engineer, remotely today, so.
Okay. Questions from the board, starting with Tori?
This redesign seems to address the concerns I had. I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lou?
Yeah, I just want to confirm, so so I know we had some outstanding public comments, so the discussions that have taken place, that's addressed the concerns. I know we received a letter from, the Animas's Trust, as well as from from Salem 5, I know, which was a lessee.
Yes, I believe so. And
Yeah, I'd be interested in making sure so there are no outstanding,
As Frank mentioned, we're not opposed to having conditions written in there that the agreement needs to be signed prior to, and that the improvements are written into the condition as well, so.
I'm sorry, what now?
The improvements are written into the condition that,
Okay.
the two statements that Frank mentioned earlier.
Okay. I have no further questions.
All right, Jean, questions?
No questions. I like the changes you made on Chalet Court.
Thanks.
Mike?
All set, thank you.
Tim?
Thank you.
Did I hear right so I'm looking at the second slide up, because there does seem to be a substantial number of changes to the existing parking lots in front of the abutting properties. Yeah, right here.
Yep.
You said that's.
That's restriping where you see the handicap. So basically, the main change is this is an old curb line here. Before, this was a sea of asphalt. You pretty much came in. So this brings the circulation back into this location. This is new curbing here. This was an old curbing. So we slid this curb over to here to have a boulevard, and you have curbing here with a sidewalk, which before you did not.
Yep.
So that's really the big change. Is this is all curbed. This is a curb island, as well as this one here, a wide throat. So now the circulation can come in, so you get more queuing coming in, and then you can come around to get into McDonald's. The trucks will come down around here and circulate back down. Here's the large, this is the old Bed Bath & Beyond building here, and then there's some strip retail in this location. So there's approximately 33 parking spaces that have been reduced on this plan. This is all just pretty much restriping and seal coating. So there'll be some cut and patch in these locations around this island. That's really the big change on their property.
Right, but, so that falls within the 180 Endicott lot.
Correct.
And that's whose responsibility?
Touring, my client will be constructing this. That's part of their agreement that's in place, their draft agreement.
Is that usual that in order to do the roadway improvement, a condition is to improve someone else's property?
Well, sometimes there's off-site improvements that are,
I mean, this is a complete revamp of the parking lot.
again, this is negotiated between the parties that they're using access with the abutters, approval, if you will.
Negotiation's one word for it. That seems awfully improper to me. Good for you for...
As well as the Salem 5 gets some parking, curbing and sidewalks revamped to connect for grade purposes, so,
I agree with Gene, it does look great, but
thanks.
no further questions.
Okay. Questions from the audience, if you would identify yourself. If you come to the microphone, Attorney McCann.
Thank you very much. My name is Nancy McCann. I'm here on behalf of Eastern Bank, trustee of the Animas's Trust. We are the direct abutters to this development. We own the property located at 160, 180, and 182 Endicott Street, and I've met with you before and expressed the concerns that we've had with regard to this development. Attorney Marinelli is correct that we have met. We've had quite a bit of back and forth between the engineers, and this design that you're seeing here, we support. It is a vast improvement over the originally submitted plan, which utilized the 1970s layout of Chalet Court. What this plan requires, however, and it kind of in response to your last question, we're giving land. We're giving land to make this happen, because Chalet Court, as it was laid out in the 1970s, does not work. I've expressed that to you before. It isn't safe in the layout. So this plan takes care of that. It takes care of our concerns. But we're donating land to make this happen, either in the form of the fee or an easement. So that's a significant concession from the abutter in order to allow this to go forward. We believe that the layout as shown will work for the existing businesses that have been there for many years. Salem 5 is located at 160 Endicott, Bed Bath & Beyond at 180, and McDonald's at 182. They've been there for years. There will certainly be some construction disruption while this is going on, and we understand that. But the applicant has indicated, and it's part of our agreement, they will work with us and we will work with them cooperatively so that this all gets redeveloped in a way that is not disruptive any more than necessary to the businesses that are there. We do have an agreement that we're working on that we will ask that be referenced in the decision itself. But some of those key points is, as Attorney Marinelli mentioned, that all of the road work and all of the work that's necessary on 180 Endicott Street to create this plan, everything that's shown on this plan, will be completed prior to the applicant requesting its first occupancy permit for 152 Endicott Street, which we anticipate will be for the Fidelity building. That there will be no bonding of this road work. The work needs to be done because that is critical to the existing businesses. The second item is that you see on this plan, you see a proposed pylon sign. We were provided with some details of what that sign might look like. That is an off-premise sign. I believe it's going to require variance from the Board of Appeals to allow an off-premise sign in the C3 zoning district. The details that we were given were really not acceptable. However, we have agreed between the parties to work that out, to figure out a way so that the signage can be accommodated if the Board of Appeals allows that sign. Our concern is that the signage cannot impede the visibility for Salem 5. And that goes for the signage as well as the landscaping that's proposed. You do have, I believe in the plan set that was submitted to you, landscaping that's being proposed both for along the Chalet Court road itself as well as some of the new islands that are proposed on the 180 Endicott Street. So that, again, is all going to be completed by the developer. But we will work cooperatively to come up with a sign package that will not impede, and that's really our only concern, is that it impedes the visibility of Salem 5 for those folks who are eastbound on Endicott Street. I believe, has there been a note, Ed, I couldn't read it from where I was, regarding, we know the 10,000 square foot building. Is there a new note on what has been presented as the hotel? Is this, and what does that note say?
Phase 2 building use to be determined under separate permitting path in the future.
Basically, just to address that one point, the engineering had raised some concern about sewerage capacity for a 95-key hotel. So for that reason, it was left that it might be a different Phase 2 building. We do want approval, make no mistake about it, for the hotel. We want the site plan approval for the hotel. And we will deal with the condition or mitigation, whatever's proposed. Other than, I know that a number was presented on something that is not tenable in terms of what the applicant could do on $750,000 on the sewage pumping station. But we will do further study on the sewage capacity, where obviously not only are there improvements here for the abutter, and for the town with the project in general, for the site, but also we are, if everything goes well, in terms of both buildings being approved, we're also providing the easement for the new sewage pumping station for the town. So, but we feel that we can work with the hotel approval and look at the sewage capacity, and so we would want the approval done for the hotel and the retail pad, just as it's been presented in the revised plans.
Subject to you getting your permits to build it.
That's right.
obviously.
Yes.
And if you have to come back for a modification, you would do so.
Exactly. So that at least is an approved plan, and it's something Attorney McCann and I have talked about as well, if a retail pad had to substitute for the hotel, provided that the peer review, as it has already come in, the vehicle trips didn't materially or substantially change, then that would be kind of the modification that I think that you just referred to.
But regardless, you would need a modification if you can't do 95 units. Either way, I mean, you're getting approved for a hotel with 95 rooms.
Exactly.
If that number varies one iota, you'll be back.
Yeah, we would have to seek modification,
Okay.
depending on whether it's minor or major, and that's to be determined. But obviously, we want to have an approved site plan that we think is conducive to the uses that are uses by right, and that we would like to provide on the site.
So you mentioned time constraints. Are we expecting that if this gets approved in the meeting on the 12th, that you would still be able to go out there and pave and do all the infrastructure that you need to do that time of year?
Well, Pete is the Director of Development. He'll address it, yeah.
Pete Doucette with Torrington Properties. So yeah, the timeline, really, an approval on the 12th would kick off an appeal period and get us into demo. The commitment that we have with Fidelity is to deliver a core and shell with everything that Attorney McCann mentioned related to the parking lot in December, basically 1 year from now.
Okay.
So we need to deliver to Fidelity in December of '24.
Okay.
So, you know, the big picture plan would be demo, develop the site, you know, work with the abutter on a full phasing and sequencing plan. There's a lot of safety, you know, logistics that got to happen at the intersection. All of that would happen over the course of spring, summer, and fall.
Just in conjunction with that, can I ask Attorney McCann, is Bed Bath Beyond open? Or are they, because they had like a Halloween thing going there, are they closed, or they?
Yes, they're closed.
So that might make things easier to do the construction. I'm assuming they're looking for a new tenant?
Well, they would certainly like to get a new tenant in there as quickly as possible, yes.
Right,
So,
right.
It may coincidentally work out
Yep.
in that way, but we still have McDonald's, we still have Salem 5, and I think we'll all work together to make sure that happens.
Okay.
So our concern with that note, but I think Attorney Marinelli has just clarified that they are seeking approval for the hotel use. If there is a change of use, that use certainly could not, and we would be looking for a condition, could not substantially or materially change the traffic impacts as have been presented and have been reviewed, and upon which this plan is based.
Right,
The whole
sure.
layout is based on a certain traffic generation, if you will, and use. So as long as that is not materially changed or substantially changed, then that may be able to be handled more easily than if there were such a change. And we will have that, and that will be addressed in our private agreement, but we would also like that as a condition as well. So I think that's really what I had to cover tonight. So we have those points. We have signage. We have making sure that the work is done prior to any issuance of CO, and not allowing bonding for the work that's done at 180 Endicott Street or within the street layout itself. And we think this is a good plan. We appreciate Torrington's willingness to work with us. And I know they appreciate the fact that the Animas's Trust has been agreeable to working with them as well. And we've both had engineers working on both sides. So we're excited about the potential for the redevelopment at 152 Endicott Street. That will certainly be a benefit, I think, to everyone. And I think this plan is a good plan. And we appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Great. Just while you're still up there, just for members of the board, we have some new members, and just to explain, what do you mean by not allowing bonding?
It's not uncommon for a site plan approval if all of the site work shown on the site plan is not done. At a time when you want to have an occupancy permit, you can request of this board to allow the applicant to bond the remaining
Tripartite.
work. Tripartite agreement, cash bond.
So you're saying as to your part of the work,
As to the work within the roadway layout,
not their part of the work? Just the
not
roadway?
152 Endicott Street. If they want to bond that work on 152 Endicott Street, that is not any of our business. We are concerned only with the roadway, which impacts our existing businesses, as well as the work that's proposed and shown, it's the work that's shown on the plan, on 180 Endicott Street. So that work cannot be bonded. That
Okay.
needs to be done prior to the certificate of occupancy.
Okay. And
Okay.
so just from the engineer again, if you could just kind of lay out, what are we going to look at if this gets approved as far as, I know you mentioned the demo first, are you going to be working on the parking lot not until maybe the spring because of the weather, or are you going to be able to get in there while they have a vacant building for the largest building on the site for them?
Yeah, so, pending our approval, we have 100% CDs that we received for Fidelity today, actually, from our architect. And, we're going to take these final drawings. We have 3 highly qualified GCs, all from this area, that we've put an RFP out. We actually narrowed it down from 6 GCs to 3. They'll bid on this final piece. They'll be awarded probably end of the year, first of the year. Our main focus is to get, the site going, the demo, and a foundation in place, because we're on a timeline with that. But yeah, as weather allows, and as we put together a logistics plan and a sequencing plan and a phasing plan that works with everybody, what works best for us is to attack it all at once. So we're going to have a site guy that I'm sure everybody's heard of, a GC that I'm sure everybody's heard of, and the intent would be focus on demo. Come March, we'll be working in the parking lot. We'll be doing all the engineering for the intersection, procuring materials for the intersection, whether it's mast arms, all of that stuff, while we're building out the site, the infrastructure, the utilities, obviously the pad and the corn shell, and, whatever we end up doing in the back, if we can advance that quickly on the heels of all of this.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Questions from the board on that? Lou?
Just a question, just in terms of, so just logistically, what will happen next, I guess, is so at our next meeting, it's the entire site plan approval, as opposed to what was sort of alluded to earlier in terms of a phased approach.
Well, it's going to be approved, it's going to be built in phases based
Right.
upon the sewer approval.
Right, okay.
But they're not going to be able to build it without,
I think I think in terms of staff, how the decision will be written.
yeah, talk a little louder, Josh.
From staff's perspective, when that second building was built, that they would have to come back to the planning board for approval, is our opinion. So, we could put a draft together and send it around to the development team and the board, but that's sort of what our conversations have been.
Is that your understanding? A second approval?
We would like the approval for the hotel, and then to work through any issues with the hotel that may be present at that time of construction. For example, sewage capacity, if there is an issue, if there is I&I or mitigation, that would be discussed at that time.
Okay.
But I mean, we have to have an approval of a site plan. It would be highly unusual to just say, this building is left open, and, our intent right now is to go forward with trying to have a hotel use and deal with that, or in the alternative, if we then have to submit a modification. As Attorney McCann said, the vehicle trips would be not materially different, not substantially different for a retail pad. And we would come back to the board and show you that. For a minor modification, I would think, because it's a use by right still under the C3, and we would just be substituting a retail pad for the hotel. But I think it becomes really ambiguous, not only for the applicant and financing, all of the things that go into a multi-million-dollar development like this, but it also would be unusual for the board to have just something like that hanging out there. It's what we're looking at is the ordinary and usual, which is an approval, and then if you have something different, you come back and you ask for modification.
Could we get clarification on the sewage issue? Will that be addressed between now and the next meeting so that we have a kind of understanding of what the issue is?
Greg, excuse me, Greg Michaelitis from August Consulting. Yeah, so the sewer issue came up on Tuesday, prior to Thanksgiving. So we were always under the impression there was capacity. Yeah, so what we have to work out the details with the staff and engineering is just the logistics. So we put a note on the plan, phase 2, to discuss, because as Pete mentioned, because of the time crunch for Fidelity, we weren't even going to be here tonight. We had to be here tonight to be here on December 12th to get Fidelity. Yes, we have a lot of work to do in the next 2 weeks to talk with staff, with the language, engineering, and really find out what's going on with the capacity, because a year ago, one of the first things they did is due diligence to civils, asked the town, right, do you have capacity? Yes, we have an email that says, yeah, there's adequate capacity. Tuesday at 9 o'clock in the morning, we find out, we have a capacity problem. So what the town asked us to do was to back off on the hotel. We said, okay. We never said we weren't going to build a hotel. We just said we'd back it off so we can be here tonight to deal with Fidelity. But it's our intent to work starting tomorrow morning on this sewer issue to find out what exactly is going on with the capacity. I mean, there's things you can do with off-peak pumping, the impellers. There's things I've dealt with this in the last 40 years. It's not anything that's, out of the ordinary. So we will figure it out in 2 weeks. When we come back here, we have to. We need to come back and get your folks' approval in 2 weeks. Also, by having a hotel on the plan, it's easier to market it, right? We have 3 or 4 different keys that they want to know you're ready to go. They don't want to know that, oh, maybe we're going to go back and get approval for a hotel. So it just helps us out, and as Attorney Marinelli alluded to, for financing, everything to go to construction financing next. We just can't have this ambiguous, what's phase 2? So we want phase 2, the abutter wants phase 2, but we understand there's a sewer issue that we have to resolve. And we don't know what the issue is, quite frankly. It was Tuesday, and Thanksgiving was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so
Right.
Here we are, so.
Could it be a thing where they come back and say you can only have 80 units instead of 95 or something like that?
We don't know. Those are the
that.
questions we have to ask, and again, there's things you can do with off-peak pumping. You can fix impellers in a pump station to get better capacity. My understanding, we're going off of 2019 plans, 2019 costs, so there's a lot of work that has to be done in the next 2
So
weeks.
this sewage pumping station is existing, or you're adding it?
No, the town always had in the CIP was to build it.
Okay.
So these plans are from 2017, 2019, and as Bob mentioned, there is an existing pump station.
So you're going to make it bigger or better?
Originally, the town wanted to put it, down in this area. Obviously, with our development now, up there is a better location, better access, so we're working out all those details. So anyway, you guys now know as much as we know. We're trying to figure this out. This is hot off the press, that there was no capacity.
Okay. Comment, Josh, or you want to reserve a comment?
Yeah, no, we've certainly been working with the development team. It is an issue that needs to be obviously resolved. So yeah, I guess just we do need to figure out how, I think the town was comfortable with in our conversation on Tuesday, with, the development team clearly is interested in moving forward with that Fidelity building. And the engineering staff, I think, is comfortable with the capacity of adding that. Once you add that second building to the site, and I'm not sure, it's sort of obviously pretty technical, that's where it starts to, I think, it starts to become kind of difficult. And so, with the existing sewer and a potential new or improved pump station and or who's paying for it and what and all that, it's still a little, just need to figure some of that out. And so I think we were comfortable with, moving forward with Fidelity and sort of punting that second building if that's what they want to, if they want to vote or move forward with Fidelity. I think we're comfortable with that. But I don't think from the town's perspective that we're comfortable approving that second building at this time because of the sewer issue.
Okay.
I guess we really don't, I wasn't at the meeting on Tuesday. It was an engineering meeting. Had I been present at the meeting, to me, it is an anomaly in terms of permitting to do something that way. And I would have advocated that position. And, I think anybody that's involved in zoning would say the same thing. You have to have an approved plan. We have to work through the details, as Mr. Michaelitis just presented to the board. If it doesn't work, we'll be back to the board. Or the pumping station will be constructed and it will have adequate capacity. I don't know what the timing is in terms of intersecting with the identification of a hotel, but those are the types of future things that would be the future considerations, not leaving open, and being maneuvered into a position of saying, building to be named is not something I would have supported at the meeting and would have advocated differently to make sure that, as I now understand from the client, they certainly do want to have the approval for the hotel and to work through those issues. And if there is anything that is insurmountable, we'll come back to the board with a modification, because we're confident that we have a handle on the type and the size of a retail pad that could be substituted, that would not materially or substantially change the vehicle trip analysis. And I think Jeff Dirk, who's on this meeting by Zoom, would confirm that as well. So we see no harm in saying, the use by right, which is a hotel, and the pad is approved, and we can work on the conditions, which would include adequate provision of sewerage and those kind of forward-thinking conditions. They're more conditions rather than saying this is left out here as a big question mark. I mean,
Right.
obviously, everything is premised on the economics of two buildings, as the board knows. And that includes also giving the town an easement for the sewer pumping station and making that available, and also building the road, and also doing the improvements for the abutter. I mean, there's a lot of beneficial elements to this proposal. So that's the approval we would request respectfully. Thank you.
What's the action date on this, Josh?
As we speak, December 4th.
December 4th?
So obviously, even, continuing this matter tonight to our next meeting, that action date does need to be extended.
We'll just need an extension in writing?
Through
Through the
Think-
12th, with a decision by the 15th?
I would say, I would request just December 18th so that
18th?
I could file the decision.
So if we could get that from you before the meeting's over, would be great.
Yes.
Other questions from the audience? Bill?
Bill Bates, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. I am so excited to hear that this project is getting there. This has been an eyesore down there for way too long. And I don't claim to know all the ins and outs of why it didn't happen years ago, but it is a shame that it's been down there in the condition it's in. And I'm so thankful that the abutters are willing to work with the new developers. That's good, common good for all of us. And I'm so thankful that they're doing that. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for some type of expansion of the gentleman's comments of what was wrong with what was going on with this. I missed the point, and I'm concerned.
I don't think I'm going to entertain that question. I think I think we've already gone by that. I'm not sure that's going to be healthy for this discussion.
Again, I hope the project and the town, I got to believe, we have to supply the infrastructure. If they need capacity, we as a town have got to do something to supply that. Every time I've ever been to a meeting, whether it be planning or zoning, you couldn't say you can't build that because we don't have enough water, because it's our responsibility to provide the infrastructure that our zoning allows. So let's pass this and get this project done. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience? Seeing none. Questions from the board?
I did have one clarifying question on that topic from before.
A question or a comment?
Question.
To
Attorney McCann?
Okay. Attorney McCann?
The question here was, you'd mentioned you're giving land. Could you say more what that is? Is it the easement that you're referring to?
It is either an easement or fee ownership of the land, and that has to be worked out with the town because ultimately this is going to be accepted as a public way. So we're willing to do either one that's needed. So it's 5,000 plus square feet, something like that, of land that allows the road to be configured as it is shown on the plan, which again addresses our concerns and creates a roadway that we think is safe and will work and provide access to all of the businesses, including 152, that will use this for access. So it is land that will allow, in layman's terms, it will allow the original layout of Chalet Court to be pulled, I'll say, a little further south, to allow sidewalks to be put in, to allow the road not to be right up against the Salem 5 building. It will allow the swing necessary for trucks and vehicles to come in. It will allow the roadway to have 15-foot wide lanes, so that's the 30-foot paved layout. All of that are improvements needed to address our concerns and to create a roadway that's going to be safe. So it's actual land that will be used to create this layout, and whether it's an easement or it's a conveyance of the ownership of the fee to ultimately the town, that will work out with town council and town staff as to it doesn't really matter to us, but it is a donation. And when I say that, I mean we are not charging the developer for that, but the consideration is the work that's being proposed within that layout as well as on 180 Endicott.
But an easement is not giving, the property would still be, that property of Chalet Court belongs to the town of Danvers, correct?
A portion of it does now.
But it's being developed
Well, it
by a
actually
third
belongs
party,
to
but
the
that
state.
belongs to the town. So it's an easement to the town for the way, is that right?
Yes.
And you said that it needs to be moved further south because there needs to be further away from the Salem 5, but Salem 5 is up against the property line, is that correct?
No. The building is not up against the property line. It's not on the property line. It's needed for a couple of reasons, as I said, to move the building, I should say, the street layout a little further away from Chalet Court so that we could have the sidewalks that will benefit 152 that the town traffic consultant wanted as well, but also to allow the vehicular movements, the turning movements for trucks coming in, taking a left off of Endicott Street or taking a right off of Endicott Street to allow them safely to come in, to allow the turn off to the McDonald's entrance to be located in a safer location than what was originally proposed, which was too close to the intersection. This will allow for the movements that are the land, the area that's needed to allow that layout to work safely, according to our engineer, according to the developer's engineer, and your peer review consultant.
Okay. I just think, thanks for all the clarification. Just want to make sure that we're clear that easement to the town of Danvers for the way, and in part of that negotiation, the developer, the third party on behalf of the town of Danvers, has agreed to improve the private property of your clients.
Yes, there are improvements to create the boulevard. All right, so curbing improvements.
Yep.
Some restriping and seal coating. But the rest of the improvements are within what will now be the way. And we're donating the land to make that happen. Not uncommon.
An easement, yep. Okay, thanks.
Further questions from the board?
Yeah.
Tori?
Question for staff. Do we have any correspondence about the sewage issue? I didn't see it. I'm not sure if I missed it or we haven't seen it yet.
The only thing in your packet, or the only thing in the packet, was the latest, most recent engineering comment where they've requested a payment, a contribution or a payment from the development team, from the developer. It's it's like a 10 or 15 page memo. It's like on page 8, so you just might not have seen it.
Thank you.
Other questions? Questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion. The applicant is going to give us a continuance. We're still within.
Are you? I guess I just want to confirm: is the applicant team in agreement to extend the action date to December 18th?
Yes, but we are understanding that there would be conditions drafted for the next meeting for December 12th. Is that correct?
Yes, there will be a draft. I think that from this conversation tonight, we should probably have a conversation this week about some of this infrastructure piece. But the understanding, yes, at the next meeting there will be a decision. Obviously, any communication that we have with you, with the development team, with town staff over the next week or two will, will influence, or what those conditions will look like. Obviously the sewer infrastructure and the hotel piece are sort of things that need to be worked out as what's been discussed tonight.
Well, if you look at number 21 of the town engineering report, it talks about a $750,000 contribution. That's not something that is acceptable. And so we're going to work through the sewerage if it is the hotel that is eventually built, but certainly we want the approval for the hotel.
On that point, just so we have an understanding, this is going to be a new sewage pumping station that's going to service how many buildings in the area, do we know? Or is it going to service the mall? So is it going to service Liberty Tree Mall?
Other properties.
I don't believe Liberty Tree Mall, but it's either just, could be wrong. My understanding is either just this property or several properties on that side of Endicott Street, not the other side, but just the southern side.
Can we have further detail on that for the next meeting? And would, I guess, in fairness, would the town be asking, say, for example, Burger King and Wendy's, and if they're all included, are they also going to participate?
This is why this item gets...
by way of assessment? Is that what you would have, an assessment?
That's why this item is, has several layers to it. So I think that, we'll have to continue this conversation over the next couple weeks and figure it out.
All right, well, we're going around in circles. So I'm going to ask Lou to make a motion to extend the public hearing.
Meeting. Sorry.
Meeting now?
It's
Meeting.
meeting and it's going to hearing.
Meeting
Right.
until December 12th with an action date of December 18th.
Okay, I'm going to read the agenda item just so we have it straight. So 152 Endicott Street, request for roadway improvement plan and site plan review pursuant to Section 4 of the zoning bylaw submitted by JBM Danvers LLC for property in the Commercial 3, C3 zoning district. The applicant proposes to improve an existing way, Chalet Court, to access a new retail/commercial building and a new hotel. Assessors map 63, lot 14. Move to continue the public meeting on this matter to Tuesday, December 12th, with an action date as requested by the applicant of December 18th.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Tori. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and just, that's it for the agenda, right?
That's it for the agenda.
Minutes.
Yeah, we had the minutes already. Yeah.
Just for staff, I know I brought it up a few times this year, and now that we're getting into the colder weather, I know there was a half-hearted patch of the roadway at Liberty Tree Mall, and we're looking at probably 4 to 5 months of cold weather. And in front of the Liberty Tree Medical Building, there's a manhole that's probably 6 or 8 inches below grade. And I can't see that getting better in the next 5 months. So I would again ask staff, and if you need me to write it down, I will, to please inquire with Simon Properties before the paving facilities close for the winter to address their horrific roadways, which have, again, got a simple little patch, which I think we'll be very hopeful that lasts the season. But there are several areas down there that, and they're getting a lot of traffic. I mean, that mall is very busy now, especially going into the holidays. And I don't know how those roads are going to stand up, but they continue to ignore, I believe, our request to put it into decent condition.
Yep. I can reach out to the contact that I have and see where that goes.
I would ask for a deadline. I would ask for a deadline of action by, I mean, that's how I seem to, when I have issues with clients or tenants or whatever, we need a deadline. We've been talking about this for a couple of years now, and so unless we get some roadway improvements done by a certain date, it would seem to me that the town could do those improvements and bill the applicant or bill the, bill the mall, because this is just, it's hazardous. And then people will get flats, or their cars will get damaged, and then they're going to look to the town to repair them, but that's not a town roadway. Those are private roadways that the town has never accepted, and it's their obligation to get them up and working. Now, the weather is still good to a certain degree. I don't know, typically asphalt plants do close in December, but I would like to see a deadline imposed. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I just want to ask about that. I mean, isn't it true also that when we approved the site plan, I think for the Aldi, didn't we include as a condition as well the repair of some of the surrounding roads? So they're aware of the situation, and perhaps it's worth reminding them.
Sorry to cut you off. At that time, they did provide evidence that pictures and other documentation at that time, this was now going back a couple years, that at that time they had done some repairs, obviously from that time, and obviously they didn't, it obviously wasn't, I'm probably talking out of turn, it probably wasn't, it wasn't substantial, obviously, at the
Didn't
time.
seem like it held up very well.
And obviously, as we speak today, it's the condition of all of it is obviously significantly worse. I mean, I dropped my daughter off at Sky Zone last week, and my car was pretty bumpy in that parking lot, so, I mean, I totally understand. It just, I totally can reach out. We have some communication and contacts there where we sit as a private entity where they're not in front of us. for a project, it just sort of, I'm willing to do it, I'm happy to do it. It just, we don't, it's difficult when they're not trying to do something, when we're trying to ask for something, but I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I think they're required to maintain a safe roadway to their site, and I don't feel that they fulfilled their obligations with the Aldi site. And it strikes me as funny that I do have some clients who are developers, and they're being pressed to finish subdivision projects and get paving done by, they were given a week or 10 days to get that done for a residential subdivision, and yet we don't really enforce anything at the mall, which strikes me as funny, and I'm disappointed in that.
Sure. I guess one way to look at it, not that I'm taking a side or whatever, the idea is that those subdivision roads are, eventually be public, likely, or potentially, and then, one is private, owned by someone else, so.
But it's open to the public.
Yeah. No,
It's not it's not a private condominium. It's a public, business that pays taxes to the town, and we try to improve it and improve the zoning there and try to, make sure we approve a lot of different new stores that have gone in there, and they should take the time and the expense to get it up to snuff, because we're going to be getting complaints in January, February if this does not get improved, because I drive there every day. My office is over there.
Right.
Every single day, and they did do small little square patches, but a mere Band-Aid on the overall problem.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously is a significant problem of it. There's no other way to say that, you know what I mean?
Anything else for staff? All right, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Second? Aye, thank you.
Aye.